What's up, everybody? And today I am gonna attempt to show you how to draw hair. Oh, and just to kind of get it out of the way, I know that my lighting situation is pretty poor, but my life situation is pretty poor. So anyway, the biggest problem that most people have when drawing hair is that it's flat. It's completely flat and it lacks any kind of dimension at all. And it kind of looks like gray spaghetti, right? It's just like a bunch of lines, and they don't really do anything. So, if you want to know how to draw realistic hair, I'm gonna try to take you through it. So I've got a little outline here of like a thin ribbon of hair, and first off, I guess I need to put a little light source here. So I'm going to show you where the light is coming from at the top left. And obviously everything that's in the path of this light is going to be highlighted. So the very first thing that we're going to do is mark out where the highlights are going to go. So there'll be about a band there, a band of highlights about here. This little part here will be highlighted, and then this part, it's the underside that's facing away, is probably going to be dark, this whole thing, and then this little area here will be highlighted. So how do you draw hair without drawing a bunch of flat little lines like that? Well, the trick is called negative drawing. So what that means is that you're actually not drawing hair at all. You're drawing the space between the hairs. So what that means is that if I were to start drawing some hairs, some lines, you got to think of these lines as the shadows that the hairs leave. And I'll draw some more over here. And darken this down here a little bit. And you can already kind of tell where I'm going with this. You can see that this little section right here is the highlight. And the reason that you can see that is because there's nothing in there. It's totally empty. And all you're seeing are the shaded areas of the hair, the shadows that the hairs are leaving. If I were to use these lines here, there's really no way of showing a highlight and a shadow, because you're just drawing individual hairs and it's totally flat. So we're going to do that here, and same principle, but we're just going to essentially follow this little ribbon pattern. So I'm going to start over here, and this part is in shadow. So I'm going to go and map out some dark areas right here. And the other thing that you have to kind of keep in mind is that when you're doing this, you don't have to draw as many hairs as there would probably be if this were real. You're more suggesting hair. You're kind of given the illusion that hair is there and not going for every individual hair. So adding in some lines that all kind of go in the same direction, which is curved around here. And then I'm going to stop where we marked out where the highlight begins. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here if I can get the angle right. And it can be sloppy a little bit. You'll notice that when you practice this a little bit, how clean or how messy your lines are doesn't necessarily make it look less like hair, but more like a different kind of hair. And sometimes if your lines are messy enough, or if they are not uniform enough or all the same length, then you can kind of wind up with something that looks like fur, like animal fur. And I'll probably show you that when we're done with this. So anyway, what I'm just doing here is kind of slowly expanding this little shaded area into where we know the highlight is going to be. Okay, so that's close, but it's really not exactly what it should look like. So because white is never white and there's never a lack of anything in there completely, we have to bring some of these lines at least all the way over. And this is the part that you got to be careful with, because if you do too many lines, then you lose your highlight completely. So I'm going to start bringing some longer lines over like this. And already it's starting to look like hair. And in general, you want, at least for this kind of hair that's long and obviously following a pattern, you want the majority of the lines to follow that pattern. But to kind of make it look realistic, like natural hair, every once in a while, a line should kind of skew off in the wrong direction. That's because nobody's hair is perfectly gone in the right direction. Gone right? That doesn't even make sense. You know what I mean. There's variation. Okay. We'll do that and darken a couple lines. Kind of randomize it a little bit. Okay. And do the same over here. Son of a bitch, this thing gets in the way. Usually when I do this, I'm turning my paper all over the place so I can get the right angle, but you guys probably don't want to see that. So I have to turn my whole big ugly body. Okay. And a lot of this, the more you practice, you'll also kind of realize that some of this is just muscle memory. Like you kind of figure out what it feels like to draw hair, and then you don't really have to think about it. Like as you can kind of see, I'm just throwing lines down and still winding up with something that, you know, pretty much looks like hair. And that's just because you kind of, like I said, you learn what it should feel like, what your hand should feel like when you're doing it. So anyway, we're going to darken this a little bit more, and I'm just using a 2B mechanical pencil. This one here, I guess I should have told you that. What I started off with was a 2H, and it's really light, and I like to go from light to dark. It just is better that way. So I've got a 2H, that was all of this here, and then I'm going to go through with a 2B, which is a softer pencil, it's a lot darker, and go back in and work on more of the shaded area. And then you're going to see some more depth, and it's going to look even more like hair in just a minute. And again, you don't draw every hair, and it's also the other reason you kind of want to work from light to dark, or excuse me, pencil lead from light to dark, as in the 2H first and then the 2B afterward, is that it's really easy to overwork this hair and then it looks completely flat again. I have done that way too many times. And then you gotta scrap it, and then you gotta start over. And then you gotta take a Xanax, because you just wasted 50 hours. Or however many hours you put into it. And I'm gonna do this over here. Son of a bitch. Look at that. Okay, I'll add another one in here. Something there. Okay. So, now, what I'm going to do, still doesn't totally look great yet, so I'm going to blend it a little bit. And of course, you blend in the direction that the hair is going. Otherwise, if you go this way against these lines that you've made, you lose too much detail, and then it just blends it too much. So just a little bit, go in the direction of the hair, like that, and go from dark to light, so you're pulling the shadow into the highlighted area. And then I also have one of these little guys here, a kneaded eraser, and they're super cheap. They're like $1. Everybody should have one. And then you kind of undo some of the work that you just did. Go through, blend it in. Great, great. And you take your kneaded eraser and you pull some of it back up. Not a lot, but just some of it. And you kind of go back to scratch and add a few more dark lines in there. I'm gonna go back over that one. That one. What am I using? 2B. I feel like it should be even darker, but this is a pretty good place to start. And go on the other side. Do the same thing again. So, as you can kind of tell, when you're doing hair and you want to make it look realistic, you kind of do it in layers, really. And there's a lot of going back and redoing, and then kind of smearing, and then redoing, and erasing, and putting more down, and erasing, and blah, blah, blah. So, oh, son of a bitch. And I'm on this little, like, wobbly, it's not a tripod, a little holder thing for this, so if you get a little motion sickness, I'm sorry, but it's all I've got. I told you my life situation is poor. So now I'm going to go down and work on some of this here, this other section. And I'm pretty much going to do the exact same thing. Actually, I'm not pretty much, I am going to do the exact same thing. And as you can maybe see, I've got the highlight marked out here. So this is going to be shaded, this is going to be shaded. And I'm going to time lapse this a little bit just so I'm not annoying the hell out of you. So I'll work on that right now. All right, and there you go. You wind up with something that looks like hair. And this is, it's kind of, well, it is the process for drawing really any kind of hair. But as you can tell, this one is really geared toward kind of long flowing hair. And you do that by having long flowing lines. If you were to want to draw like maybe coarse hair, or like I had mentioned earlier, you might accidentally wind up with hair that looks more like fur, because fur is very coarse, usually. That is a little bit of a different process, and I'll show you that too while we're at it. So we'll do something that uses shorter lines, something that's not long and flowy like that, but rather short and kind of coarse. And I don't really know what I'm doing here, but whenever I start off doing something like this, like for I drew a portrait of my dog, or any kind of animals really that's covered in fur, I kind of map out how long the fur is going to be. So right here we're going pretty short. And then I'll also do a light source over there too. So, same kind of a thing, and not at the exact same time. What you're doing is using really short lines, really short lines, and kind of filling in the form of the fur. And if you look, you can kind of see how this fur is really thick, and it's got layers to it. And like this would be a layer right here, right here, right here, right here, right here. So these lines here signify the tip of that particular layer. And it doesn't always work that way because not all fur is in layers. Some of it's very uniform, and you kind of have to experiment with this a little bit to get the effect that you want. But this is a good place to start. And what's happening here is that each of these layers has dark fur that is kind of in shadow that separates each layer, and that gives it volume, and it makes it look thick and like it has a lot of form. So this layer here is kind of its own little chunk, and down here toward this layer, it has part of it here in shadow. And just like how we did the long hair, you're only drawing the fur that is in shadow. The main difference is that you're using short lines. You're using short, choppy lines because this is short, choppy fur. And again here, I'm starting off light with a 2H pencil. And once we kind of get some of this mapped in here, we'll go back through and add some more contrast with the darker pencil. And with fur like this, where it's kind of choppy and it goes kind of all over the place, it's okay for different sections like here to go in different directions, or for your lines to really deviate from each other and to go all over the place, because again, it just makes it look more natural. And that's really what happens in real life. The thicker the hair is and the thicker the fur, the more chances there are for hairs to go in a different direction than the majority, if that makes any sense. Probably not. It's really late and I'm tired and I can't even. Okay. So we're getting somewhere. I don't know how quickly, but we're getting there. And I don't know where, but you and I are going there. And I don't know what kind of animal this would be either. If you have any ideas about what would wear this messy fur, let me know. Okay, so there is kind of the basic maybe skeleton of the fur, the basic outline and form to it, but we didn't really take into account the light source. So I'm going to go through here and blend it a little bit, just like we did with the long hair. Not a whole lot, because you still want to have detail and be able to see individual strokes that you made with the pencil. Now, I'm going to go back through with the 2B pencil and then kind of shade some of this area around here. This area would be in shadow. But the thing here to do is to not make it too dark, because you still, even though this whole half is going to be in shadow, you don't want to lose the deviation between the layers of fur. So that still has to be darker than the rest that's in the shadow. And how we're going to make sure that that happens is by using the blending stump again. So let me add in some shadow here, some darker pencil lines. And Jesus, I don't know what kind of gremlin this is going to be. Okay, there you have it. That is the gist of how to draw fur. And just like there are a bunch of different types of hair, there are tons and tons and tons of variety in fur of different animals, whether it's wet or dry or dirty or covered in snow or whatever the case may be. It's always going to look different. So this is a nice place to at least get you started. And the other thing that I would recommend doing is, which I didn't do and probably should have, well, no. What I would recommend that you do is to use reference photos when you're drawing fur, especially. Hair, not so much, because, I mean, human hair, there's only a few varieties. But fur, really, you need to be using some kind of reference photo for this. Because as you can see right now, I wound up with fur that doesn't look like it belongs to any type of animal. And that's kind of problematic. Or it would be problematic if I were trying to draw a specific animal. And now look at what I've done. But anyway, there you go. Hopefully that at least gets you started drawing hair and drawing fur. Of course, practice makes perfect, so let me know in the comments how you draw hair or how you would do things differently. And if you have any other tips for anybody else who might be watching this video. Thanks and take care.